Today I'm talking to Chris Voss, not a real estate agent. He's the author of the renowned bestseller, Never Split the Difference. Chris isn't just the author of a bestseller. He is the former chief international hostage and kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. Most of you know and have heard about Chris, his book, and probably his company, Black Swan Group. They have taken these life-saving skills in Chris's book and help people learn and apply them to their businesses. Black Swan Group's clients find that when these skills are applied, it's not uncommon or unusual for their business to double or better. Before this interview, to bring it home, I have a list not shared often enough that is a summary of Chris's experience and career accomplishments. Voss was a member of the New York City Joint Terrorist Task Force from 1986 to 2000. He was involved in the monitoring of the terror stop bombers after spending 3 years investigating the first bombing of the World Trade Center. He was the co-case agent during the investigation of the 1996 TWA Flight 800 explosion. He spent 24 years working in the FBI Crisis Negotiating Unit and was the FBI's Chief International Hostage and Kidnapping Negotiator from 2003 to 2007. In 2006, he was the lead negotiator on the Jill Carroll case in Iraq, as well as the Steve Centanni case in the Gaza Strip. Voss also supervised additional hostage cases in the Philippines, Colombia, and Haiti. After working on more than 150 hostage cases, he retired from the FBI in 2007 and founded the Black Swan Group. In 2016, Voss co-authored the book, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as Your Life Depended on It. Thanks for listening to the Jerry Metcalf podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. This podcast is to share knowledge for realtors and raise awareness for Give Back Homes, where real estate professionals work together for social good. Jet Centers Aviation, Bentley Atlanta, Legends Global, thank you for your sponsorship. All right, everybody, it's the Jerry Metcalf podcast where top real estate agents tell how they do it. And today, anyone who listens to this show ever knows how excited I am about this, because we have the one and only Chris Voss on the show, author of Never Split the Difference, has made a huge impact on my life and so many people we know. Chris, thank you for being on the show.
It's a pleasure, Jerry. Thank you for having me on.
So everybody knows I'm just a touch excited, just a touch. You get quoted on just about every episode of the show. So everybody, Chris is here on the show. I'm going to interview Chris about negotiating and how it applies to our industry. But before I do that, many of you know him. A few of you, if you've not been on planet Earth long enough, just kidding, may not have heard of him yet, but I want to just run through really who Chris is before I ask him these questions to put it into reference for all of us. So Chris, of course, we know, is author of the book, Never Split the Difference. Huge bestseller. I was recommended to read that book 15 times. And when the last person who told me to read it said, Jerry, I read the book, and he's a big spreadsheet guy. He said, my business went up 40%, literally 40%, because I applied the principles to my business. I thought, yeah, maybe I ought to pick that one up. Finally read it. We need to quote him and get him on the show, by the way, Isaac. And I don't remember who it was, but I'll tag him and we'll find everybody. But read the book. Also, what I want everybody to know about Chris is he is the formal lead negotiator or chief negotiator for international negotiator for the FBI. I always get your title wrong, Chris, and what it used to be. But the point is, top, best, head, international FBI, the best. His book talks about how he really applied and what made his negotiations So powerful and so impactful. He was a member of the New York City Joint Terrorist Attack Force from 1986 to the year of 2000. He was involved in monitoring the terror stop bombers after spending 3 years investigating the first bombing of the World Trade Center. He was the co-case agent during the investigation of the 1996 TWA Flight 800 explosion. He spent 24 years working on the FBI Crisis Negotiating Unit and was the FBI's Chief International Hostage and Kidnapping Negotiator from 2003 to 2007. In 2006, he was the lead negotiator on the Jill Carroll case in Iraq, as well as the Steve Centanni case in the Gaza Strip. He also supervised additional hostage cases in the Philippines, Colombia, and Haiti. After working on more than 150 international hostage negotiation cases, he retired from the FBI in 2007 and founded the Black Swan Group. In 2016, he co-authored the best book ever written, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as Your Life Depended on It. So that was a mouthful. Chris, everybody knowing all of that about you, should I add anything to that? What have I missed?
No, I mean, I think the biggest difference with, the crazy idea that hostage negotiation applies to business is we've been applying it to business for quite a while. I taught in some business schools, and we had our business school students, MBA students, applying it on their jobs every day. And that's one of the things that I think makes Never Split the Difference a good book, was because we got a lot of business examples right after the hostage situations that show you how the exact same thing was applied with terrorists as they were with business executives.
Exactly. And I think it's important that whether we're a terrorist or a business executive, we're all people. We're all emotional. We all put our pants on one leg at a time. And there's certain things that the wiring in human beings is in common. And sometimes when we're negotiating, and I would say for this interview and for my experience in my business, when someone's purchasing a home, it's their home. So it's, whether we'll call it, anthropology or whatever, we are wired when it comes to our home to be very emotional. And when we get emotional, in your book, it talks about how the more emotional you get, the decisions come out of making emotions, but the more emotional and negative your emotions are, I explain this to my kids, and like, the more emotional you are about things, negatively emotional, the dumber you get. And they think that's so funny, but it helps them by making them laugh about it. It helps them keep that in perspective and making sure we help our clients diffuse those negative emotions or those fears, and or when we're negotiating in deals, to bring about the best deal ever. That being said, the first question I have for you is, what advice do you have for real estate agents when it comes to negotiating?
Well, it's really kind of interesting because, you got people whose hopes and dreams are on the line. Everybody knows that buying or selling of a house is one of the most stressful events in anybody's life. You know that, but you don't know how to deal with it. And the real issue is there's so many negative emotions, so many bad things going to happen. The 2 millimeter shift really is for real estate agents is don't ignore or deny the negatives. Most people try to deal with negative emotions and transactions by saying, I don't want you to feel, I don't want you to worry, I don't want you to be concerned. The denial aspect doesn't work, which is why most people have their default is to ignore. We know problems are coming, so we're going to pretend like they're not coming, and we're going to close our eyes and hopefully.
Well, it's kind of like saying, don't think about an elephant.
Right.
Don't worry.
Right. Or the elephant in the room, because that's a great analogy. And nobody ever made the elephant in the room go away by saying, don't think about that elephant, or by ignoring the elephant. Mm-hmm. Now, the crazy thing that we learned in hostage negotiation, and we didn't realize it was all life, but negative emotions really drive our decision making. That's why we talk about them so much. So the 2 millimeter shift from a hostage negotiator is to say, instead of saying, I don't want you to be worried about this, you say, I'm sure this seems worrisome. I mean, just calling it out in that tiny little difference makes a massive difference right away. And it's against people's gut instinct because they think denying it is the equivalent of calling it out. And learning that tiny skill is huge, especially for real estate agents.
I love what you said about the millimeter shift, because a lot of people think they have to make these drastic shifts to get drastic changes. But usually it's that much of a change in what you're doing and how you're doing it that's going to make the huge impact on the results of what you're getting and dealing with negotiating in people.
Absolutely, especially when consistently applied.
Well, there you go. And then you talked about saying how did you put that? It seems like this could be worrisome. Was that one of the things that you just said?
Yeah, or it seems like this is scary. I mean, buying a house is a scary process. You want to say to a client, I don't want you to be scared. And instead, yeah, this is scary.
Well, and it puts you on the other side of the table. They're scared, but you don't want them to be scared. You're pointing out scared, but you're saying they shouldn't be, and now they're scared anyway. And now what did you just do but exacerbate it?
Right.
So you talk
that's exactly right.
And you talk in your book about it's what you call labeling. When you say it seems like you're scared, or you label an emotion that they may, and it could be labeling, or we talk about mislabeling. But when you label an emotion, to label it and identify it for that person, I know you talk about a study where by doing that, it literally can help diffuse that emotion.
Yeah, and again, and we'll make the distinction, negative emotions here, because like opposite ends of a magnet, they act differently. But the negative emotions, a book called The Upward Spiral, they monitored people's brain activity with an fMRI, so they could actually watch the electrical activity. And they showed them a picture that induced a negative emotion, and they simply asked the person to identify that emotion, which is what a label does. It identifies it. And every single time when they identified the emotion, the electrical activity in the negative area of the brain where the negative emotions are, every time it diminished, simply by identifying it.
And the thing that I love about that is in the past, and I've even talked to people about identifying emotions, and they're like, oh, no, you can't do that. That just makes it worse. And I just find that so funny. Like, very intelligent, well-educated people have had that response. But when you apply it, whether it's to my children or to my clients or to whatever situation or to the agent on the other end of the table or sometimes to whoever, it is amazing. And just having that study to prove it, how much it does that. Now, something else, and I'm going to ask you the next question, I'm going to ask you the next question first because it may lead to it. I don't want to jump the gun on you. So what do you think, and we may have drilled into this a little bit already, but what do you think the biggest mistake is that real estate agents make when they negotiate contracts?
I think just being impatient. The real estate agent's version of value and the buyer's and the seller's version of value is not the same thing. Mm-hmm. The real estate agent wants to get this done quickly. And they think it's to everybody's advantage that it be done quickly. Well, it's not. I mean, unfortunately, that's a little bit selfish. A real estate agent wants to get it done quickly because the real estate agent is under some very real pressures. You want to get paid. Mm-hmm. But what the truth of the matter is, the last impression is the lasting impression. There's scientific data. Again, the Gallup poll created this data. People don't remember things how they happen. They remember them how they ended. So the final sales price is going to be the lasting impression, not how long it took. So the idea of trying to make meet in the middle, push the transaction together, will cause a buyer or a seller to have a bad lasting impression, which then means that's what kills real estate agents' referral pipeline. That's why 80% of the people involved in a transaction will say they would refer their agent, and only 20% of them do. Because if people feel pushed into a transaction, the last impression is a bad impression, mm-hmm. even if the agent did a phenomenal job.
You're so
everything beautifully.
And something I would love to add to that from the real estate agent, you're in the clouds over here with all these great negotiating abilities, and I'm down here in the dirt hustling, selling some houses. But in doing that, in reading your book, as I went through that and applied so many of the things that the book talks about, I'm embarrassed to admit it took me this long to learn, but I had this very much like, I'm here to get the deal done. I'm here to love you, whatever, but really, like, let's just get the deal done. And a client gets you on the phone and they start opening up, or they want to keep you on the phone and talk to you about whatever. And the instant reaction is, yeah, that's great. I got to run. And from reading your book, when those things would happen, it made me realize, like, when they start doing that, now's the time to listen. Now's the time to hear what they have to say. They're emotional or they wouldn't be doing this. It gives me the opportunity to diffuse those emotions now. And while it seems like you said, and back to the time thing is when you address those things up front in those conversations up front and know how to handle those emotions up front, because in the beginning, people will get emotional and and you'll try to like keep it short and just make the results happen. And they'll forgive you for it, maybe a time or two. But over time, it goes to that lasting impression. They're not feeling good about it anymore. So by addressing it early and taking the time to listen and diffuse and use what you've learned, it's really just empathy and listening and diffusing these emotions and getting them back into reality, getting them out of their own way. You save so much time and, by the way, generate lots of referrals. From reading your book, I had several experiences, but I at the time, the first time I read your book, someone referred to me who was referred to me by another vendor, and the other vendor warned me that she could be very difficult. And I remember, and she was someone that was really key to my sphere of influence, my network, any damage that could have been done, it could have really negatively impacted me in the business I generated. And using mirroring, but before we talk about mirroring, I want to talk about this yes-no stuff. So we'll get back to it. But in using mirroring, and we'll get back to this, it literally, using that and so many other things, she would call the other professional in another industry who had referred me and tell her how much she loved me and how amazing I was. And the woman who referred me was like, all of my clients are going to you now because this is the most difficult one, and I don't know what you did, but she loves you. Chris, it was all your book. So getting into that, one of the first things I learned from your book is getting to yes versus no. Everybody's got this impression when they negotiate, the idea is to convince and get to yes. What is that? What is the reality behind that, and what does that mean?
Well, what happens is people feel trapped. They feel tied down. They feel cornered. And every time you do that, you're putting toxin on the relationship. You're putting toxin on the trust for you. I mean, if you were to look up that style, they call it the yes momentum or momentum selling. I mean, it comes under a lot of different terms. They say that each yes is a micro agreement. And if you get enough micro agreements, they have to give you yes to the big agreement.
Called manipulation, by the way.
And it's trapping people. People hate it. I mean, everybody hates it. It's insane. And it's what kills relationships. It's why people are uncomfortable dealing with you.
And it's how it makes people feel.
Anyone in general.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
No, and how it makes people feel. Getting in that, like you say this, I'm taking all this stuff from you, but people come to you, how are you doing today? I'm fine. Or so on that, I'm fine. Like, really, are you? There are 3 kinds of yeses that you talk about. So getting people to say no. You'd be surprised what people would say no to. Give us an example. You have an example of you're at a book signing, or if you've got a better one, but you're at a book signing and you had like less than 5 seconds and the guy's got like bodyguards and you're walking up and you just want him to speak to your students of I don't know if it was a workshop you were doing or what, but give us the story of how you took a couple of seconds to get him to agree to something.
Well, since I know how bad yes is and how good no is, it's Jack Welch. He's at a book signing. He and his wife Susie are signing the Real Life MBA. I want him to come and speak at my class at USC. And Jack Welch was the CEO of GE and he's got several monster books out there. He's a true celebrity. And I just walk up and I say, is it a ridiculous idea for you to come and speak at the negotiation course I teach at USC? And he kind of stares at me, and then he gets this real scowl on his face. I mean, like incredibly intense scowl. Right. And he looks up into the sky behind me and to the left, and he just freezes. I mean, he looked furious. And Jack Welch's not a young guy, so he had this furious look on his face. I was genuinely afraid that he'd had a stroke.
The bodyguards were going to like drag you out, right?
Yeah. I thought they were going to tackle me because I hurt him or because I made him mad or he's going to start screaming at security. He looked so angry. But when his face finally unfroze, that was the way he looked when he was concentrating and thinking. And he looks at me and he says, "This is my personal assistant's name. This is a Twitter account we have set up to talk with her. I will call her and tell her who you are, what you want. I think we're going to be in Los Angeles in the fall. If we are, we'll come in and speak at your course."
And you got all of that out of him by saying, would it be ridiculous if you spoke to my students?
No. A single no is worth at least 5 yeses. At least.
So
As far as helping people think stuff through.
Speaking of yeses, so people think they want a yes. I love it. I'm like, my name is Jerry Metcalf. I'm addicted to yes. We're all addicted to yes.
Hi, Jerry.
Everybody? No. So speaking of yes, the thing we forget it, and we know, but we forget, is there are lots of kinds of yeses. And you talk about what are the different kinds of yeses?
Commitment, confirmation, and the one we hear most often, counterfeit.
Exactly. And usually when we're getting that yes and pushing for it, it's the counterfeit yes that we get.
Counterfeit yes. Yeah.
Just to drive home that no. And I love what you say. You say you'd be surprised what people will say no to. Like this author. What was his name again?
Jack Welch.
Jack Welch. How could I forget Jack Welch? Jack Welch. I don't forget Chris Voss. Anyway, but Jack Welch saying no to Chris Voss. So you talk about, or here's how I'm going to ask you. Are there different types of negotiators?
Yeah, well, we think that the world splits evenly into 3 default types, how we view conflict. And it's from the caveman days, and it's fight, flight, and make friends. The assertives, the analysts, and the accommodators. Fight, flight, make friends. And there's a way you can tell. You can give people a test, and we've tested several thousand people. And regardless of gender, man or woman, doesn't matter. Ethnicity, Americans, Chinese, it doesn't matter. The world splits pretty evenly into the 3 types.
Wow. So this is really good stuff to everybody, because I was negotiating with a flight. What's the analytical? The analytical is the flight.
They're the flight guys. They're like, fighting is stupid. I'm getting out of here. That's the way the analyst sees it.
Yeah. So give us a little bit about how, well, I'm going to preface it with this. I've read your book a few times, Chris. Y'all bear with me, because I'm going to let Chris do more of the talking. But there's fight, flight, make friends, which is assertive, analytical, and accommodator. And something that's really powerful about those things is understanding where they're coming from when you're negotiating, but also understanding that people will back down on something they seem, you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but something they really feel attached to. They'll back off on that in lieu of something else, depending on which they are. So that being said, tell us a little bit about what's important to each of those people, starting with the assertive.
Well, the assertive wants to know that you heard him. An assertive wants to know that you understood that where they came from. You know, an assertive doesn't particularly care if you cooperate. They're going to be darn sure that you know where they're coming from. It's actually more important to them than actually making the deal, but to feel heard. An assertive wants to get their point across. They don't care if you agree with it, but they want to know for sure that you've heard it.
And how does an assertive know that you've heard them?
I'm sorry?
How does an assertive know? Like when you're talking to an assertive, how do they know when you're communicating? What's the best way to make sure they know?
And that's an easy one too. I mean, if you get that's right out of an assertive, if you summarize what they've said, if you paraphrase it, if you offer them any sort of insight into what they're saying, and you get a that's right out of an assertive, that's the signal that they feel heard.
And I would say the assertives are usually, when I'm negotiating, those are usually the ones that raise their voice, they start yelling, they don't stop talking, and they just keep going and going and going. And they're the ones that for most people probably are the ones where your gut reaction is to say, you know what, you're crazy, F you. Or to explain to them the statistics and why they're wrong and what the comps are and what the situation is and the fact that you've been doing this for 30 years and done 20 deals a week, and this is why you're right. And an assertive hears that and they're like, screw you. But if you can say something, when I feel that compulsion to want to tell them how I'm right and they're wrong, which is the dumbest thing ever, is to go, okay, this is the moment that I need to start saying what they would say that's right too. And that doesn't mean to be dishonest, just means to empathize. It makes me actively listen, and it also engages in them feeling your empathy. Is that phrase it up pretty well?
1,000%, 1,000%, and especially when have really lost your patience with someone, that's exactly the time you want to get a that's right out of them.
That's my trigger. Sometimes when I'm like, oh, that's the moment that we need to go, okay, that, remove that, diffuse that emotion, because when I do that, by the way, I'm 30% dumber or a lot dumber, can't make good decisions. And I need to say that's right, because it's a little bit of forced sympathy too, and it reconnects you to that person so you can get back on track with them. Tell us a little bit, or do you want to add anything to that before I go to the analytical?
No, that's good. We nailed it.
So analytical, what is it about the analyticals I find a little bit difficult, if you ask me. Those are probably the toughest.
And us assertives do find analysts exhausting.
See, I thought I was an accommodator, but I might be an assertive. But tell me a little bit. I know what I know exactly. And reading your book at the time I was dealing with the analytical gave me such insight into understanding why they were so difficult for me. But that being said, tell us your kind of synopsis of the analytical.
Well, I mean, they view conflict as just an utter waste of time. They like to be effective. And so they don't like ineffective activity. And they see conflict arguments as just completely ineffective.
Or friendly chat.
What's that?
Or friendly chat that the accommodator loves. I don't think they like that either.
An analyst can have a friendly chat if it's not business related. They see business and personal relationships as completely separate things.
Yes.
Like you go hang out at an analyst's house and they're barbecuing and you're having a couple of beers. They could be the chattiest people you ever met in your life. They see business and personal relationships as entirely separate. And so when they're in business, they're not looking for chit chat because they don't see how it's doing them any good.
And I have found dealing with analyticals before, when I was their realtor. I was not their friend. I was not their confidant. I was their realtor. And I've actually been able to go deeper with analyticals because I understand them now. The other thing that I have found interesting that I learned from you about analyticals is most people, especially accommodators, they go out they are like, you know what, I'm just going to give you this because I know it's going to come back, or I just want you to like me. And that's kind of we'll get into the accommodators in a minute. But the analyticals, when an accommodator does that, and you can dig deeper on this, but I remember that the analyticals they go like, what did you do that for? Like, why are you being nice to me? What do you want for that? And that's where I'm like I'm just trying to be nice. I'm just trying to make the deal and give because I'm customer, and they're getting offended by it, or they're becoming suspicious and not trusting me. And a lot of people I've heard get very confused in dealing with people that way. But now that I get it, it's so much clarity. But tell us a little bit about how you figured that out and more about how they work.
Yeah, a friendly gesture, something like that. An analyst tries to put everything in context. They view it as a piece of information, and this is new information. They're like, they're like a deer. If you were, if you were to throw something out to a deer would be like, what was that? What's that about? And
they've got their spreadsheets and everything in order, and now you're messing it all up. Right.
This is not on a spreadsheet. They don't know how to interpret this data, and therefore, since it's unexpected, they don't know how to interpret it. Then it's a trap. It's a threat. And I have to at least think about this for several days before I understand how to react. And you give an analyst a gesture, you're hoping at least to thank you in a moment, and they want to think about it before they say thank you.
Exactly. And when analyticals and assertives are talking, when you're quiet for an assertive, that means it's time for me to talk. For an analytical, they need the quiet to think and process. And when you're the assertive talking to the analytical is just thinking, would you shut up because I can't think? So they become, I got this all from you. So you, I believe, are an assertive.
I am kind of a stone cold assertive, yes.
So what is your advice on how to deal with these analyticals? especially being an assertive? Because those are the two, aren't the analyticals and the assertives, those are the two hardest, the worst to negotiate with one another. Would that be right? I think
well, they find each other exhausting, and the crazy thing is they're two sides of the exact same coin. They have so much in common. It's just how they react to it is completely differently, and they do find each other quite exhausting.
So how do you deal with that, Chris? How do you deal with these analyticals?
Well, we found the labeling tool is one of the best things of all. I mean, the thing I like about labels, it seems like you've given us a lot of thought. That's an example of a label that'll get an analyst chattering away. Mm-hmm. It's a hostage negotiation skill that I didn't think was particularly useful in business. I thought business was all about great questions. And the great questions were what and how questions. And we found out indirectly that the analysts love labels. Like you can't say to an analyst, what made you say that? They'll clam right up. But if you say, seems like you have a lot of good reasons for saying that, they're going to blurt out all their reasons. Now, one was a question, one was an observation, but there's something about the label observation that doesn't seem threatening to an analyst, and they're dying to tell you what they've got in their head. They just don't want to be attacked over it. That's the real issue. They don't want it to be disputed, disregarded, or ignored. So as soon as you create an environment where you act like you're fascinated by their information, you can't wait to get it, sometimes it might be hard to shut them up.
I've had that happen. I was reading your book. I'm not going to give details, but because we're on the podcast, but I had that happen, and it was an analytical. And I think I had literally just read this about labeling. And I was on the phone with this person, and she was someone who she wasn't exactly my client, but it was for a deal that I had stepped in for. And she unloaded on me and went and went and went. And I heard her say something, and I thought, that's the thing to mirror or label. I would mirror in this case, and I did it. And I just said the 3 words. We haven't talked much about mirroring. It's where we repeat the last 3 words. This wasn't even the last 3, but it was the close enough because she wasn't stopping, and she had gone on for a good 5 minutes. But once I did that, suddenly she could hear me listening to her. And I mean, for the next 15 minutes, she talked and talked and talked and was not a talker. But it's back to your point in labels and mirrors is I had never seen that side of her, and it did a complete 180 on the entire transaction and in everything that was going on. It's not in how much, it's in the subtleties, just the mirroring and the 3 words. And it's not, a lot of people would say, well, you're just manipulating. It's putting you in a position where you remember it's not about me. The best advice I've ever gotten is remember it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about this person being understood and heard, and it's giving you ways to truly do that.
Yeah. Amen.
Right. I love it. I'm like, okay, wait, this is Chris's interview, not Jerry Metcalf's interview and her thoughts on the book. So the accommodator, tell us about the accommodator, the third. So we got assertive, fight, analytical, flight, and then make friends / the accommodator.
Accommodator is a natural-born, relationship-focused person. I mean, the relationship is tantamount. I mean, they're the ones, like an accommodator's version of a white lie is ridiculously broad because they don't see it as lying. They see it as protecting you, preserving the relationships. They're more concerned about your negative emotions, negative reactions than anything else. Total relationship focus, make friends.
Interesting. So, and the worst person to negotiate with an accommodator is an accommodator, I believe.
Probably, yeah. That's a great point because they'll be so worried about being friendly, they'll never get anything
They never get anywhere because they're just trying to keep each other happy, and so nobody's telling the truth ever.
Yeah.
So, on that topic of you were talking about accommodators really wanting to just keep, no matter what, keep everybody happy, and they get around the truth. And I think a lot of the things about your book and what you teach people and what you help people implement is that when you're negotiating or living life or whatever it is, that anytime you're trying to get around stuff, you're never going to get where you need to be. You got to dive straight in it. And you have an analogy on the matrix. There's the red pill and the green pill. Tell us, just kind of, because the accommodator really might, it's almost like, I think the accommodator might be the one that needs that more than anybody, but I'm going to pause there and let you elaborate on that.
Yeah, well, you got to find out how deep the rabbit hole goes. I mean, you don't make obstacles go away by pretending they're not there. You're just leaving yourself landmines that you're going to step on. The issue is, how do we dive into this stuff without it being an unpleasant experience, which it really can be. Mm-hmm. It's not that hard. They're tiny little changes, tiny little 2 millimeter shifts, which most people are counter to what you've been taught, but they're not complicated and they're really easy to implement, and they accelerate the process, which is exactly what you were talking about beforehand. The investment up front accelerates the process.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you talk about, when you have the investment up front with people, it makes the relationship a much stronger relationship and, quote, lower maintenance or not as exhaustively time consuming, no matter what you are, accommodator, fighter, or accommodator, analytical, or assertive. So what is your biggest advice for an accommodating negotiator? Like when someone's an accommodator and they're negotiating, because that's probably the one that just wants to keep it nice and thinks that's the best way to do it. What would be your advice to help them grasp and get around that?
The harsh reality is, you're not helping people by not sharing the truth with them. Mm-hmm. Most people that tell the truth tell it in a really blunt way. And it's not that you've told the truth, it's that you've told it bluntly. You need to tell people the truth. And the accommodator's great skill is by being very cautious about how their words land. So if you combine those two, that's a person we call a straight shooter. Everybody loves a straight shooter. A straight shooter tells us the truth. They don't hurt our feelings in the process. The accommodators have this great gift of not hurting feelings. So now just find a way with that same style to tell the truth. And then you really make a lot better deals, and you'll have more trusted relationships because people will trust you.
Which is what you do. So on that, I know in this business, accommodators, I think I'm a little bit of an accommodator. I think, and you say, we all have a little bit of everything in us, right?
Well, I think what really happens is, us assertives and analysts, we come to, if we're learners, we come to see that relationships are critical. Mm-hmm. And whether or not you have accommodator in you, you're smart enough to know you need it. You need to be relationship focused. You need to worry about how people feel about stuff, because otherwise it's going to destroy your working relationship. So it's one of those things, and we need elements from all three types. So I would hope that you have some accommodator in you, and I would, if I was coaching you, I would say, and evolve it, develop it, add it more to your game. Because if you're natural born assertive, then that you have to have that too. So you've got that. You were gifted by that when you were created. Add the other stuff, and then you become a complete negotiator.
What about these analyticals? Where do they fit in all that?
Analyticals, you need to think things through. I mean, assertives, we don't think things through enough. One of the jokes is, analyticals love decision trees, where there's all these possibilities and they map all the decisions out. They think everything through. Yeah. And a decision tree for an assertive looks like a telephone pole. It's just a straight line. This is where I'm going.
Maybe
but, we need to be able to think things through some, like analysts overthink. But that doesn't mean the thinking is bad. Their natural capacity is to gather data and analyze it to give you a well-informed outcome. And
so go ahead.
Negotiation is the information gathering process, and analysts love to gather information.
So, and I'll stop drilling on this, but I find this really fun part of the negotiating, because it's understanding who you're talking to understand what's going to impact them, especially when things get heated. For example, if you're dealing with an analytical, or if you're dealing with an accommodator, when the accommodator gets quiet, they're pissed.
Yeah.
That is one thing I do. When I'm pissed, I don't have much to say. I'm like, that's not good, because I don't want to say anything to upset people, because what's most important to me in negotiating is everybody leaves the table happy. Assertive just wants to leave the table getting what they want. And for whatever you give me, the nature of an assertive, and this is from the book, the nature of the assertive is, if I give you, I'm waiting for what I get in return. The accommodator is the giver. Where does the analytical come in all this? What are they?
Well, they looked at reciprocity as potentially a trap. I mean,
right.
Does it make sense within their analysis?
Yeah.
If it makes sense within their analysis, then it's okay. But reciprocity is sort of like a human interaction.
But if you're being too nice, you're really weirding them out. I have discovered that. Like, you are they are suspicious. Like, if you're really nice and overly accommodating, they are worried about what's coming. Would that be accurate? Because I never understood that before. And I was like, oh my God, like, the harder I try to be nice, the more upset they get. And now I understand why. That is not it. And as an accommodator, you just want to, like, make them happy. And when they're upset, you think if you're sad for them, maybe that's what will make everything better. And then when you apply this is the accommodator in me. It's like, okay, like, now when people are upset, like, now I know how to diffuse it. Now I know how to help them. Now I know how to get everybody in the better place. I know how to make a good deal. And oh, by the way, I can sleep at night. And my deals are getting done faster. Assertive, I think the assertives, they just need to learn to, like, put in the reciprocity, relationship, patience component. What's the advice to the analytical on negotiating, and how did they use these tools?
Well, you're going to learn more the more that you interact. I mean, the relationship is an avenue for gathering information. You're interested in information.
You see, I'm trying real hard to understand the analytical. Right.
Yeah. Is it a means of gathering information? Oh, wow. Okay, I'll do it. They're the one thing they want to know is, have they gathered the information that's available?
Exactly.
The relationship is a way to gather the information.
Wow. And in negotiating with people, if I haven't said this already, the assertive, like you said, they just want to be heard. The accommodator wants everybody happy. And the analytical wants to know they have all the information possible before they made the decision.
Exactly.
And when you've satisfied that component in each person, that helps them understand the decision, and also can get them past what you originally thought was, like, irrefutable. This was it. They weren't going to change their minds. This was firm. This is how they were. And that's having that experience, they're able to adjust and just get out of their own way. Would that be?
Yeah, and it's really about helping people get out of their own way. That's a good way to put it.
And helping us how to help me get out of my own way too, by the way.
Yes.
Why? I think this goes without saying, but Brooke insisted I ask this question. Why do you recommend? Everybody knows why I do, but why do you recommend that realtors read your book, Never Split the Difference?
Well, it's an easy, digestible, actionable book. There's some books out there that makes a lot of sense, but you don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Like the Challenger Sale is a book that I've come across recently, and there's a lot of exceptionally good ideas in there. And they lay out who a challenger is. A challenger is willing to challenge people, but in an emotionally intelligent way. They don't say it like that, but they make the case that challengers in sales, regardless of what you're selling, that type is very successful. It's a little short on how to do it in an emotionally intelligent way. So we get into it's a really how-to, simple, easy to apply book. I mean, you check our reviews on Amazon, there's no shortage of reviews that say, before I finished the first chapter, I was making deals.
Yeah.
That tells you that the stuff is easy to understand and implement and works if people can start applying it right away. And that's why it's a great read for realtors, because like everybody else, you're under time pressure, and real estate agents are not on a salary. So there's even more of a time pressure there. You don't have time to do an in-depth dive on something you're not sure is going to work. Never Split the Difference is going to work.
Exactly. Do you get a lot of people telling you, oh, it works for hostage negotiating, but that's not going to work in my business. That's not going to work in That's not going to work in negotiating. We're not emotional. We're rational. We're doing a business deal. It's different. Do you ever get that?
From closed-minded people, I get that. I mean, to me, I know right away the difference between somebody who's got an open mind and a closed mind.
Well, there's no such thing as a closed mind, Chris. You've already taught me that. So come on, like, give us more.
Yeah, no, I mean, anybody that says, anybody encounters a new idea and they say that's not going to work, or I already did it. Those are not the words of a top performer.
Right.
Top performer encounters a new idea. Even if they're worried it won't work, they'll go like, wow, that's really interesting. And they'll figure out a way to test it and learn from it.
Yeah.
So, even before we got no shortage of proof that it works in every industry and every ethnicity across the board. But even if we didn't, we'd expose some people to the ideas and they go like, it sounds interesting. I'm going to give it a try. These are the people that are open-minded. The people that are top performers are open-minded. And
if you read this book and you hear, I love it because the book is so entertaining. It's so applicable to life and business. But you're like, there's no way. Like, first of all, you're very transparent about mistakes that you made and what you learned from them. And then there are other situations where you're like, there's no way he's going to get them. This is such a horrible situation. Like, this is insane. Like, how could you ever diffuse all this chaos and get people out of this alive, ever? And then you literally walk through step by step what happened, the communication, how people gave away information they didn't mean to, and you do it in, like you said, such an applicable way. In doing that, I would love to know, because there's so many books out there about negotiating. There's so many people with so many strategies. I have tried to read them all and never got through never got through the first chapter of any of them. I read your book and read it 6 times and couldn't put it down. Obviously, I'm reading it 6 times and maybe I'll probably read it 50. What do you think was the difference in you versus everybody else? How did you figure this stuff out? Or what can you say about that? Or what? Yeah.
Well, I think it's a combination of the fact that our stuff works, number one. Number two, I had to teach this stuff as soon as I started learning it, and it was really important to teach it in digestible ways. You're an FBI agent, you're teaching hostage negotiation to local police officers. Your stuff better work.
Yeah.
And it better be easy to understand, because this is a blue-collar audience that has no tolerance for pie in the sky, ivory tower theories that don't work. And then finally, the last critical difference really was our co-author, Tal Raz, who is a genius writer on writing stuff that's digestible, organized, entertaining, and easy to read. I mean, if you see a business book on an area that you're interested in and Tal Raz's name is on it, I guarantee you that's going to be a good book.
All Tal Raz books. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that Tal's written, if it's, he Never Eat Alone from back in 2005 is still a business networking classic, and Tal was a co-author on that book.
Well, that makes, to Never Eat Alone is one of our CEO's favorites of Compass, in addition to Never Split the Difference, of course. So I just find that I'm going to ask you our one last question, but on that, I really want to drill you on how you figured this stuff out. And you've given us some examples, but do you have any stories that you would find might be compelling to share to real estate agents, or most of our listeners are real estate agents, but a lot of our listeners, clients listen too. So anything you would have to share with us on how, I know there are a lot of ways, how you figured out, for example, this idea of getting people to say yes, 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 until you get to the ultimate yes, versus you'd be shocked what people would say no to. How did you figure that or any of these things out? Do you have any stories you could share?
Well, it was mainly, and it took me a long time to realize, but as a hostage negotiator, we never had one skill that was ever designed to get anybody to say yes, ever. So my negotiation career was not founded on the idea that yes was the holy grail, that yes was the objective. My entire negotiation career was really founded on the idea a workable deal is the objective, something that we've laid out that we can implement, that people are good with, that they'll implement not because we forced them to, but because they wanted to. Because, a hostage negotiator, if our bad guy doesn't comply, we can't sue him. I mean,
Right.
they didn't comply.
You can't.
Things
You
went
push them in a
bad.
corner and they just start killing people. It's a little different.
Right, right. Yeah, so it all had to be voluntary compliance, not they're not coming out because the SWAT team's out there. I mean, if that worked, we wouldn't have hostage negotiators. And as a matter of fact, we had SWAT for years and years and years before we had hostage negotiators, and we found out the hard way that forcing people out didn't work. So they've got to voluntarily comply. And when I was a hostage negotiator, we ran across the book Getting to Yes. I mean, we all had it.
Yeah.
And it's intellectually sound. And I used to give it to my negotiators, and every time I gave it to one of them, they'd read it and say, "This makes sense. I just don't know how to use it."
Yeah.
And that's the problem with Getting to Yes. I mean, you kind of don't say, "Yeah, I went out and made a deal before I was 5 pages into it."
Yeah.
So this is applicable, and we learn through trial and error, mostly success because we had a brain trust behind the development of the ideas. I mean, my company, we got a brain trust in my company now. We're pushing it forward and continuing to refine the ideas with other hostage negotiators that are working with us. And then with my son, who's been negotiating with me for the last
amazing.
30 years.
Yeah. Brandon's good. Brandon's really good. Brandon taught you because you had to be a part of raising Brandon. So you had to negotiate with him, right? And like he might know your stuff better than you do.
I got a lot of insights from my interaction with him. I mean, I'm thankful he participated fully in writing the book, and he's my chief negotiator now. He does all the business negotiations on behalf of our company.
He's awesome. Yeah, I've gotten to know him. He's amazing. So, do you have time for one more story? I'd love to get you to share.
Sure.
One more story. So, because we haven't talked much about, there's so many things. We haven't talked about proof of life, which everybody, you're just going to have to talk to Brandon about working with Chris to learn more about all these amazing things. But proof of life, but really, and this is kind of both though, collaborative questions. You've got a story and you can share what I'm thinking of, or you may have a better one on how you figured out, you talked about in the beginning, it was like, if you ever wanted to get anything, you had to be ready to give something. So you didn't always ask for proof of life because you already knew they were alive. And that, I don't want to go too much into that because that may not be the story, or then maybe that is the one to share with us on, it's collaborative questions and proof of life. Do you want to share? You probably know which one I'm thinking about, or is there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, the trick is how do you get stuff in a negotiation without asking for it?
There you go.
Or how do you ask without owing?
That's what I just asked you. Yeah, that was it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we were reluctant to ask for proof of life because, number one, we might already be satisfied they're alive. And number two, if we asked, we owed. I mean, there's reciprocity is a human nature dynamic that exists across the board. And if you ask, you in fact owe. And if you fail to comply, they've got a legitimate accusation of bad faith negotiations. So how do you get without asking? And we came to learn that instead of saying, what's the hostage's name of their high school mascot, which is your security question, instead we just switched to a legitimate how question. How do we know they're alive? That's not asking for anything. It's just pointing out something that's inarguably true, that you don't know they're alive, and it's a legitimate question. Mm-hmm. And there are versions of that in all business transactions. What are the legitimate questions that actually get you where you want to go, but you don't actually ask for anything, What are
the legitimate questions that actually get you where you want to go? But I just wanted to really hone that in for everybody. But finish. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, how do you get stuff without owing?
Yeah.
And a how question in some format is usually it, and it's really how we got to, after one or two versions of the how question in Kidnapping, then our how question would be, how are we supposed to pay if we don't know the hostage is alive? Which is a version of how am I supposed to do that, which we use in all of our business negotiations instead of saying no.
Give us an example in business negotiations, how you do that.
I'll just flat out say when the other side's got a term that I don't like, that I either don't want to comply with or I can't, instead of out and out rejecting that term, I just say, how am I supposed to do that?
Yeah.
They may want to hire us and put a work for hire clause in the contract. We don't do work for hire.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say, how are we supposed to do work for hire? What that does is it shifts the burden of the problem back onto the problem creator. If you're the pain in the neck and you're creating problems, I'm going to put them on you, and that's going to be the best way to get them solved.
I love that. And it puts them in the driver's seat.
That's the emotional advantage of that, is they absolutely feel like they're in the driver's seat. And that's the reason why it works.
And they don't feel like they're being manipulated or pushed into a corner, because that's where it all goes bad.
Exactly.
So much more. There's the radio voice. There's, what is there? Oh gosh, I've forgotten what it is.
The late night FM DJ.
That's it. The late night FM. We don't do work for hire. And then
there you go. Exactly right.
There's the, what is the other one? The accusation audit. Love the accusation.
Well, that's when you just make a list of all the names that they would call you. You just call them out. They're elephant in a room, potential elephants in a room.
Just dive right into it. It seems so counterintuitive, but it's helping the other person. But as an individual applying these, it helps you be a better person, active listener with empathy to get the deals done and live a better life too, by the way. Like, never split the difference. I was talking to someone the other day they were talking about all of these, like Mickey Singer, who I love, who's a meditator, and Vishen Lakhiani, Code of an Extraordinary Mind, who's all like peace and love. And I'm like, but the best of them all is never split the difference. Hardcore FBI negotiator, but it's the same stuff, but it's even more applicable. I just love it. So, last question. What do you think are the best steps or best next steps for everybody listening and for real estate agents out there to improve their negotiation skills?
All right, you got to practice small stakes. You're not gonna drop your negotiation skills in the middle of a seller transaction where your livelihood is on the line. So practice with the Starbucks clerk. Practice with your Uber driver. Actually, on my Instagram account today, I put out the That's Right challenge. Get a That's Right out of your Lyft driver or your Uber driver, somebody driving for you.
Did you have people commenting on their Uber driver experiences today on there? I love it.
Yeah, I want you to get a 5-star review from your Lyft driver. So you get a That's Right out of them, you get a 5-star review, you're going to get some good practice. Just kind of summarize to them what you think driving for Lyft might be for them. And then just keep feeding back to them whatever they tell you till they finally say that's right to you. It's real simple.
It's brilliant.
It's the perfect practice.
It's great practice. And even like when I'm flying and doing things, I'm always applying. It's just become a part of what I do until I talk to you, Chris, and I just get nervous because like that's where I learned, like, he's like, it's like the God or the Buddha or the whatever of all negotiating.
I'm the Fred Flintstone of cavemen.
Exactly. So I said one more question, but I'm going to do one more. So for all of us listening to this interview and talking in this conversation today, if we were going to forget everything but one thing, what one thing would you want us to take away from this interview other than to read Never Split the Difference? What's the one thing we should remember? Experiment
with hearing the other side out first. Just hear them out. See what happens.
Love it. Awesome. All right, everybody. Chris, thank you. Chris Voss, what's the best way to reach you? Your website or?
The newsletter is the best way. The newsletter is the gateway to everything that we do. It's free. The newsletter is free. It's short.
And it's really concise. Good.
Training announcements. Everything. It's the gateway to everything. It's a gateway to the gold mine.
And you're training a little bit on that. I know you're doing workshops. You just did one in Atlanta. I think you're doing one in Dallas pretty soon.
We're going to be in Dallas on Friday. This coming week, and then we're in New York after that. We're covering the entire country through the course of the year.
So all over the country, and the best way to find out where your workshops are, and for those of us who want to work with you, engage in coaching, engaging in workshops, the best place to find that is at blackswangroupLTD.com, or where's the?
Yeah, blackswanltd.com.
Oh, blackswanltd.com is the best place to go to find that stuff.
Yeah.
So
and there's a text to sign up function for the newsletter.
Oh, great. Okay.
If you sign up via text, it's real simple. The number you text to is 22828. And that number again is 22828. And the message you send to that number is FBI empathy, all one word, no space between FBI and empathy. Don't let your spell check put a space in there. FBI empathy, all one word, to 22828. You get a text back. We'll ask for your email. We'll sign you up. Awesome. You find out about everything.
And just so you know, these guys do coaching. They do workshops, keynote speaking, sales. You've got a really powerful, I think sales. I don't know if it would I call it. I don't know what you call it, but a really powerful workshop you do for corporations. I mean, have a lot of stuff to offer, and amazing, life-changing. I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed on this show, untriggered, whatever by me, have said to me, Chris Voss, never split the difference. It's a life changer. Chris,
that's cool.
Thank you so much for being on the show.